Hello, and welcome to The Spotlight, where we explore how mental health and our identities intersect and influence each other. I'm your host, Liesl, and I'm here today with Anwesh Sahoo, a visual designer and technical artist, but perhaps as or more importantly, a queer advocate and icon, especially ever since he became Mr. Gay India in 2016. Anwesh, thank you for joining us today. I'm so happy to be speaking to you. Before we go any further, I just want to say thank you for sharing all of this, for trusting us and our listeners with your story. How are you doing?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy that I finally get to have a conversation with you. And it's been incredible knowing you and the wonderful work that you do in your own space, in your own incredible way. And there was no way I would have, not agreed to do this, to have this golden opportunity of finally having a conversation with you.
Oh
so thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. That's so sweet. Yeah, we've worked together off and on for a while now. How many years has it been? Like 6?
7.
7 years? 7 years, yeah. We've both been through some fundamental changes in life, I think, during that time. And speaking of, so that's basically why we're here today. I wanted to ask you, we've known each other for a while now. And during that time in our working relationship, it was never apparent to me, but did you ever have a period of struggle when your mental health just wasn't good?
So I think in my initial coming out years, I was really, really struggling with, of course, accepting my sexuality at that point in time. I think this is around 2011, 2012, that was the time when I was moving towards my late teens, 16, 17, and everything around you starts becoming more and more real, right? I think around the time you're like 13, 14, you're still, things are happening, your body's changing and you're sort of dealing with that. But people around you completely change by the time you're 16, 17, at least the kids around me, they become like young men and women. And there are expectations from you as a young adult that become more and more apparent. And of course, that is also a time when we're all, starting to work towards our, possible career opportunities that we want to foray into. And I had reached a point where I was genuinely not able to focus on the right things, focus on the things that really mattered to me, because this one thing that kept nagging me that I could be probably gay and I was probably not attracted to women the way, the society wanted me to be attracted to them. I mean, I think women are beautiful. I think women are gorgeous individuals, but it's just that I just felt that maybe when I was going to enter, 11th grade, I was going to start liking women all of a sudden. And that was just not happening at all. In fact, all of my attraction was towards men. And you have to understand that, 10 years ago, and probably even today in small town India, you don't really come across a lot of vocabulary to also explain how you feel towards, any person. If you're sexually attracted to them, or if you're just attracted to this individual, you don't know how to define it. You don't have the words for it. You don't have the vocabulary for it. There's no sex education. So there's, sexuality education is a far cry in most Indian, schools. Struggling with all of these, a lot of questions in my head, but no answers, and nobody to, reach out to as well. And we have to also, keep in mind that I was a very heavily bullied kid. I was extremely bullied, verbal attacked all times. There were times when I would not want to go to school because of the amount of hatred and unnecessary, things that were just thrown at me like I was some garbage bin, and just people would come and just say things to me. And I would never have I didn't know how to retort all of that negativity because I always thought I was wrong. So how can I have, a comeback? So I started walking into this rabbit hole where I, at one point, had reached, was convinced that the only way I was going to have a better life was killing myself. Because there's no reference point in pop culture. There is no reference point around me. There's probably not even another queer person around me. I did see maybe a few queer people in school, but obviously at that point, queerness was not a conversation that we had actively. Instagram was still not as big as it is today, So on Instagram, you have a lot of queer influencers who you can follow or you can reach out to. I used to follow maybe a couple of them on YouTube because YouTube in America was a really big thing. So there were a couple of YouTubers who would sort of have all these conversations about sexuality, but it was still a very distant conversation to me. It was something that was happening in a different part of the world that was not relevant to my context as well. Representation I had was basically on television, and television in India was horrible. It still is. But I mean, with OTT, of course, it's getting a lot better. But at that point, you would have access to like a few shows here and there, and they would just show queer people in the most confused and absolutely bizarre manner. I still remember watching a couple of these shows which showed absolutely wrong information. So there's no way that I can find a reference point, and the only way I felt I was going to feel better was just taking my life away, so I could just have some sense of peace in my life. And I often laugh it off today, but trust me, it was one of the most painful discussions that I was having with myself internally, and not being able to have that conversation with anyone because I was so scared of someone judging me or someone, just having conversation around me being queer in any way. I hated the word queer at that point. I hated the word gay at that point. I didn't want to be associated to it by any means. And I remember once telling myself, maybe when I grow up, I'll just probably have a dog and I'll have a beautiful house and I'll be happy. But of course, I mean, and I remember thinking this when I went to someone's wedding. So I saw the couple sort of going up the ladder. And of course, in India, weddings are huge. So they had this massive pedestal which was rotating, and I just saw them, and I had tears rolling down my eyes. I was just like, this is so beautiful, and it's so unfortunate that I will probably never have this in my life. It just felt miserable, and I just felt that I deserved all the beautiful, amazing things in my life. At this point, back in school, there were days when I would, out of no reason, just start crying. There would be tears rolling down my eyes. So clearly something was obviously wrong with me, and I didn't know what was. There was no conversation around mental health at that point as well. This one class it was an English literature class, and I was just sitting there, and again, I had this attack, and I just had tears rolling down my eyes. I was shivering. I had so much within me, but I was just so anxious, there was just pent up anger and pent up frustration of not being able to express myself in the best way and just being, bullied so much. So this girl next to me, she realized that something was wrong with me, and she was like, Anwesh, are you fine? Are you fine? And when she kept saying that again and again, I was just like waterworks through and through. And the teacher who was in the classroom at that point, she was like, Anwesh, let's go and have a conversation. So she took me to another classroom. She really tried to get things out of me, and I just felt that I remember telling this to her, that I feel that my existence is of no use anymore. And she was obviously taken aback because she was like, a 16-year-old talking like this is not normal. And it's very unfortunate what I went through at that point. And I always think that, if I would have taken my life away at that point, I would have never seen the amazing things that life had to offer me from there on. And which is why I'm all the more grateful for anything nice that happens to me. I'm so grateful for each and every day that I get to breathe and I get to spread any form of happiness, because I know what it means to be so close to death and so close to just giving up and hitting the rock bottom in your life in the truest sense, and then rising up from the ashes like a phoenix. So thankfully, she took me to a psychologist, a school psychologist, and I remember going the very next morning, just walking up to her room. She had this really beautiful little chamber to herself, which was right next to the principal's office. Very intimidating, but she made me feel very calm, and she made me feel very, very much at ease. And she asked me a bunch of questions, which I answered all of them wrongly. I knew the answers to all of those questions in my head. So when I came out of that room, I knew that I was gay. I just told myself that I am actually gay. Whatever questions she was asking, they all clearly, scream in every possible way that I am attracted to men. I was just, I felt very relieved in some ways, but I also knew that there was this conflict in my head of whether I wanted to keep this information to myself, or how am I going to first deal with this information myself to begin with, right? So I think at that point I was also tired of contemplating death all the time. It was getting very exhausting.
It's exhausting, yeah.
I think when you are, when there's, you basically, you prepped all your life for this, exam that, that you're supposed to give. And, you believe that there's something that probably nice that might happen. I was also hoping to rewrite the narrative that were provided with all along, right? I mean, we've always been told that we are sex maniacs, or we are just bubbling buffoons, or we are caricatures. And I was convinced that that was untrue. Somehow, someone just within me, this voice within me just told me that this narrative is incorrect and we need to fix it. And I have the opportunity to fix it because I have the access to education the way I do. The fact that I can speak a language which is considered a privilege here in our country. And the fact that me being able to speak this language also makes it accessible for me to have literature that has already been written about queerness by amazing people, by amazing human rights activists and equal rights activists all through these years. And I have some role to play in this bigger picture as well. And even if I'm able to save another boat along with mine, that is enough, And that's basically how my blog started, because I felt like I needed a sense of belonging. And I was so frustrated that I didn't know where else to go but to I obviously didn't want to give up, because I don't believe that I've ever grown up with that attitude that I would give up. I would never, just give up without trying. I just wanted to give it a try and see what's going to come out of that. I will forever be grateful that there was this voice within me that told me that there are better things ahead. Just stick around. And I think one after the other, everything got better from there on. Everything started getting, easier in my life when I decided that, okay, I am gay, and maybe I don't want to talk about it with anyone right now, but at least if I'm at peace with it, that's all that matters. And I'm going to focus all of my energy into everything that I enjoy, that I truly love, because I have the potential to be my greatest version. And if I'm not giving up without being the best version of me, I'm not giving up without living and seeing the best of the things that life has to offer, because life has a lot of beautiful, incredible experiences. And all of us, each one of us, no matter where we belong in the social hierarchy, no matter what gender identity, we were born with, or what sexuality we were born with, no matter where we lie in this world, we all must have access to the.
Oh my God, Anwesh, that's thank you for sharing that story. And the thoughtfulness behind it also. You've clearly reflected on this, on your experience, and that I think it is a huge mental health skill, that ability to reflect and synthesize our own experience and take learnings away and try to apply them. I mean, that's really the only thing that we can do in life. Right? Even putting a name to that disorientation or confusion, whatever it was, a lot of people actually struggle to articulate what they're feeling, whether it's sadness, or frustration, kind of differentiating between that. And that's it's a key skill in life, but we're not really taught to express our emotions, right? What are your thoughts around that? Did that feel like part of the experience in addition to struggling to articulate your sexuality?
Absolutely. So obviously the conflict, when it began, I didn't even know that it was a conflict, right? I mean, the only thing I remember very clearly feeling was there's something not right about it. There's something that has changed. And I think acknowledging is the first step to actually trying to fix something, right? And we're obviously never taught to acknowledge, anything, because speaking it out loud makes it all the more apparent that there is something wrong with it. So the first thing that when something of this sort happens to you is you don't think about it. And I did try not thinking about it. It's I think in psychology, when I took up psychology back in college, there was this one chapter where we were asked to not think about a pink elephant. I think it's called the pink elephant analogy or something of that sort. I can't remember. But when you're being told, or when you're being asked to not think about the pink elephant, the only thing that you can think about is a pink elephant.
Right.
So when you're asked to not think about, this conflict that is going on in your head, the only thing that you can actually think about at that point was the conflict. And I think the only skill probably that I had at that point was I'm always a person who wants to resolve any issues that I'm dealing with at that point in time, because I always like going forward in my life. I always want to keep moving forward. Otherwise, I get bored. And I'm probably just, I happen to be just a person who's too fickle to live with,
What? No.
steadiness. But I wanted to move ahead in my life, and I realized that there was clearly something that's not wrong, because there were very clear symptoms, like physical symptoms, right? For example,
I was going to ask that, yeah, because when we keep things inside, often the only way we can experience them is through physical symptoms.
Absolutely. So, for example, I had reached this point where I had stopped talking to people, and I'm a very talkative person. At least, when I was younger.
Not now, not at all. I don't see that.
I've become quite, rather quiet. To tell that something was clearly off with the way I was behaving, and I didn't like people, for example, talking around me. I didn't like talking at all. Any form of noise started really bothering me. And I think I became more and more aware of everything that was happening around me. So I was becoming more and more sensitive to, the traffic or the pollution. Nothing would make me happy anymore. My goal at that point was getting, a 95% in my 12th boards, like every quintessential Indian kid. And I genuinely felt that I was probably going to fuck up those results if I don't, resolve whatever was going on in my head. And I had become extremely fond of darkness all of a sudden. I very well remember switching off the lights in my room. I would go to my desk and I would just take a pencil. I would scribble aggressively on the table. That was one thing that I had never done in my life. And I don't know where it came from, but it
just to get the emotions out somehow, is that it?
Exactly. I just wanted to grab hold of something and just tear it apart. I think that's the feeling that I had at that point. And it was clearly that entire scribble was basically a visual representation of what was going on in my head. And the fact that I was not able to talk about it to anyone, the fact that I didn't have any words to describe it, was all the more frustrating. And this was also a point when the bullying was also getting extremely intense. And it was not only happening in school, but it was happening every new place that I was going. I hated being the butt of all jokes. Nobody likes being the butt.
Nobody likes it. Yeah.
These were things that were bothering me, and I really wanted to know how I was going to be able to fix it. So I think this went on for forever and ever, and there was also a lot of pressure from my parents to do extremely well in the entrance examinations that we sit for at that point. So JEE happens to be one of the joint entrance examination, is something that's very, very important here in India. So I was obviously not only prepping for my 12th board exams, but I was also prepping for these entrance examinations, and I was clearly suffering while prep for those examinations. I did not like going to that coaching center, so I told my parents, and it was very, very difficult having this conversation with them because they were extremely upset. There are no words to describe how disappointed they were at that point, and how they felt like my life was going to come to an end. And I hated.
Sorry, I just want to ask you, did that feel to you, did it feel like they were disappointed in you or in the circumstance?
They were disappointed in me.
Oh, God.
And I felt very invalidated. I felt like a fool. I felt like an idiot. And I felt like I believe that I have so much potential. I'm convinced that I have so much to give. How is it that, they don't see what I see in me? And nobody was seeing what I was seeing in me at that point. So I remember just told my parents that, what, I don't think I can go for these, for prepping these examinations anymore, because I'm just going through a lot right now. And this is literally like, I'm going to kill myself if I keep doing this again and again. Please, just give me this. I can't even tell you what's going on, but something is wrong. So just let me let go of this one thing so that I can just focus on, lesser things and prioritize things a little better in my life. So I let go of, going to that coaching center. And thankfully, after that point, I just had a little more time to myself to self-introspect. And I would write. I started writing, which is something that, you anyway are taught of journaling, when you're going through some amount of conflict in your head. So thankfully, even though I didn't, have any words for it, but I didn't even know that it was called journaling, but I just had a diary and I just started writing. And writing basically, or writing, little poems, they were basically a way for me to express myself in a very secretive manner, information that I just kept to myself. And they were a way for me to have a conversation with me actively and find solutions to whatever was happening around me. So it all started with journaling, and then I found this one book called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari by Robin S. Sharma. And that book had massive influence on me at that point. I found myself in that book, and I found the meaning of life, again, and through that book. And I think once I finally started picking myself up from that point on, I knew that I had a bigger purpose, or maybe I was just delusional enough to believe that I had a bigger purpose. But I guess delusion sometimes, helps you get through things in life.
I mean, they can be powerful motivations. There's nothing wrong with a little delusional thinking.
I just feel that it's always better to be overconfident than to be underconfident. Just be overconfident sometimes in life. It's fine.
I think that's pretty good advice. Actually, I do want to talk to you about confidence because, you mentioned that you were bullied pretty badly. And, one of the mental health struggles that often comes out of bullying and some of the experiences that you went through is this like sort of inner critic that like tells you terrible things about yourself. That's the voice in the back of your head being like, you're worthless. You're never going to amount to anything, why are you like this? And everyone has that to some extent. And I think, that just is like one of the hardest things to overcome because like you're almost in a battle with yourself. Is that something that you experienced? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Of course. I mean, when you're being bullied, you start becoming convinced that whatever is being thrown at you is correct. So you reach a point where you're like, okay, you know what? They're absolutely correct. And I think also, I don't know if this is also true for someone who comes from like a small town that I came from. I grew up in a very small village in Orissa, and we had just moved recently to Delhi. So Delhi was a culture shock to me overall as well.
Big city,
yeah, exactly. And I think the only way I could probably survive, of course, was, the fact that I was doing academically. But, in school, nobody cares about academics at that point. You just want to be the cool kid. You want to be
right.
all the cool kids. I think my self-worth was basically at rock bottom. I did not, and dignity is a fundamental right, which I believe that I did not deserve anymore because, everybody keeps telling me that, I'm probably gay, I'm femme, I'm this and I'm that, and very, very, funny names and very, very nasty things that are being said about you, that are being talked about you. So obviously you start being, you start believing that everything that is being said is true. I think probably watching America's Next Top Model. That is what actually started, making me feel better about myself. Trust me.
That's great. Thank you, Miss Kyra, right?
So I did not watch America's Next Top Model to look at the girls. I was watching America's Next Top Model to critique all those girls. And like, you didn't do that right. That posture was absolutely incorrect. I would have slayed all the way if this is how I would have done that. So, obviously, I think even that, stupid content, when you have nothing, there's, something is better than nothing. So watching that of made me feel like, okay, and there was Miss J in that show, remember?
Absolutely, yeah.
So there were a couple of, queer judges on the show as well. The first time I saw like a guy wearing a pair of heels, things like these, right? I mean, then you start thinking that, okay, this is valid in some other part of the world. So, let's just calm down. So I think that was probably the little trigger that I needed, that, it's fine. And I started watching a lot more. I think America's Got Talent also had this one contestant at that point. It was Stephen Richless. So Stephen Richless happens to be a pole dancer, and he also happens to be gay. Him wearing so he was wearing stripper heels, which is something that I've never seen before in my life, and they were gorgeous, beautiful, big heels. And he was getting bullied on the show by this one of the judges on the show. I think it was Piers Morgan or someone, I can't remember the name. So him getting bullied, and then there were people in the audience who were supporting him. I think that was basically the point where I felt like, wow. So there are going to be bullies, but there are also going to be people who are going to support you, who are going to, believe that you're beautiful and that you're gorgeous if you represent yourself, with all the potential that you have within you. If you bring that out, then people are going to measure you by your potential and by your skill, instead of just looking at you as another gay guy. So I think that was basically that point in time where things started clicking for me, and I realized, I can build confidence. And it took years. When confidence is taken away from you, it took me good 4 to 5 years to really pull it back. And I think now is when I can really, so basically, like, it's taken me all my life till now to actually have that confidence that, okay, now I believe that, okay, you can't tell me that I'm wrong. I mean, I will read you down if you ever come for me.
Because until that point, there's still that voice in your head, right? You're still doing battle with that voice. And then finally after years and years of like fighting against it, then it kind of, I'm so glad. Yeah. I'm so glad you did find that content. And I think that speaks to a really important point. There's been all this talk, in recent years about how important representation is in media, right? And I don't think, there's been a lot of talk. There's been a lot of talk. I don't think there's been a lot of understanding about why. And this is something you spoke earlier when you were first telling your story, is this idea that, like, I couldn't see a future for myself. When you looked around, like, you went to this wedding and you can see, like, a positive future for yourself, right? And when you start to see
one.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Like, where you're valued, where you are considered, valuable and deserving of everything everybody else does, and then when you see these representations of people who have had experiences that you have had, who, have the same orientation or identity or background that you have, and you see that they are, how they are being valued, how they're valuing themselves. I mean, that can be powerful for mental health.
Absolutely. Drag Race had such an incredible, impact on the way I started looking at myself, because for the first time in, the popular culture, you have a show where there are a group of femme gay boys or femme queer people coming together and owning themselves, being extremely confident. Why do we watch drag queens? Because we watch them for their confidence and for the incredible amount, how they have basically used their own personal trauma to create incredible, gorgeous art. And I think what is more empowering than that? Than all of these people who've been through so much, but yet managed to create incredible forms of art. And those were the people who basically genuinely, truly inspired me.
Something that you mentioned, that, this idea of like how you approached your struggle, I think speaks, it so busts the myth of mental health being about strength or weakness, right? Because you approached it from a very resilient place. Like, okay, I'm struggling now, but I can fix it. Something's wrong, but I have to give it a try. I have to fix it. That approach to, like, I'm going to keep trying at this. That comes from a place of resilience, and whether, mental health, life, resilience, it doesn't mean you don't struggle, but it means that you learn the skills you need to help you cope better. It means that you find the people and environment and support system that are going to help empower you and help you make you feel worthy, right?
With an environment that is not supporting you at all.
Exactly.
I think that's something that I always thank myself for, my younger self for, that he had the courage to stand up for something that he didn't even know what it was, but he just knew that he had to stand by it. And my parents were, unfortunately, they didn't understand it. They were not very supportive. So wasn't even my friends around me. The very few friends that I had at that point were also not supportive of what I was thinking, the way I wanted to lead my life. And I think queer culture and the way queer people live is also something that's still new, right? And still relatively just not a conversation that we have very actively. So, I mean, it was just a very, very, very difficult time. And I will forever be grateful to my 18-year-old self who had the courage to go through it, because that was probably the toughest time in my life. And, since then, coming out and things just started clicking, right? I mean, me winning Mr. Gay India was another, point of validation in my life that, okay, I was probably doing something right. Start owning up to your shit, and once things start clicking, that's when you feel that, okay, you know what I'm doing is right. Let me continue to listen to myself and then continue to build myself, build my skills, build my confidence. Things are going to get better.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's like a very like, it gets better. Right. No, I'm definitely glad that can be the message today. But yeah, what you're saying it speaks to like a fundamental principle of certain modes of therapy, right? This idea that if you take action in accordance to like what you value, things get better. It doesn't mean you won't ever struggle again, but things do get better. And like what really stood out for me in your first story also is this idea that like you came out of that first conversation with that school therapist and realized like, okay, I'm gay. And then you said that moment of self-acceptance, like things started getting better from, it's almost like you found your North Star. Like, I know this about myself. I accept this about myself. Now what? Right. And that I think is so poignant, because that's really all we can do when we're struggling is just accept ourselves and then try to take one step at a time in the direction that gives us hope and meaning.
People don't have it in them to also direct themselves right in the right way. It's we can't blame them for it. Some people are extroverts, some people are introverts. I do believe that I'm this person. I always look for answers within me for every problem that I have. But there are a lot of people who do need that external stimuli, which is why I completely, support seeking help whenever you need it, because you don't always have it within you, and it's fine. You don't have to find the answer to every question within you. I've also, reached a point in my life where, because when you grow up being queer and when you grow up not having a lot of people believing in you, you teach yourself to also do a lot of things, right? So even when it came to like building my own brand or doing things around what I wanted to do, I always wanted to do all of things on my own. And then I reached a point where I was like, I don't have to do all of these things on my own. I can look for help. I can ask for help. I can collaborate with more people. And that's the same, it works the same way with therapy. When you need help, you just ask out for help. You don't have to fix everything on your own. It's fine if you can't.
And also like you have these, people are different in terms of sort of like where they look for answers and how easy it is for them to look internally, look externally for support. But also when you're struggling with your mental health, like you really struggle to put, a lot of people really struggle to set up any kind of structure for themselves. So even if, they can look inward to like devote time to like look for that kind of guidance and guiding content to do that, it might still be really difficult. And that's like you're saying, that's not failing. It's just that's just the nature of struggle.
Thing I still remember. So I have a journal still, and in that journal I write the things that inspire me the most. I think I should have one of the things right here. Just read it down. Should have something interesting written down here. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Oh my God, not this. But I think, I would just have these, I would have these things written like, say, for example, only dead fish go with the flow. Things like
that. I love that one. But so it is amazing.
Have these...
Yeah, go ahead.
Go on.
I was just saying, it is amazing that we do find like different things inspirational at different points of mental health, mental struggle, life, like the passage of years also, like sometimes like something speaks to you at a certain point and then later you're like, what was I thinking? Or it still speaks to you. Sometimes it still speaks to you.
It always does, and I still read those lines again. Anytime I'm upset or I'm disappointed, I go and I read those same lines, and it makes you chuckle sometimes. But there are certain things that really stick to you that still make sense to me even till date. So I read them out and I feel okay, this is absolutely making sense to me. Things like only dead fish go with the flow, and in some ways it is true for queer people because. The system is not designed to favor me. So I can't go with the flow. And I have a lot of my, cishet friends who come to me and they say very happily that, I'm just going with the flow. And I always think that I just can't make that choice of going with the flow.
Yeah.
Especially where I'm in the environment that I'm in. Exactly. Going with the flow is actually privilege. And I don't have that privilege. And at least I'm smart enough to acknowledge the fact that I don't have that privilege, and therefore I have to create my own opportunities. I have to look for opportunities myself, and I have to hustle my way. I mean, you either want to cry about it, or you want to be disappointed about it, or you want to go through that door, feeling happy and optimistic is then your choice.
You go back and read your journals, periodically, because I think that's also something that, whether you're struggling, once you kind of come out of that struggle and you do feel steadier and you do feel like clarity of purpose and more confidence again, we like seldom celebrate that growth, right? It's almost like we want to put it behind us, but sometimes we do need to revisit it. So if only to like keep doing the things that make us healthy and like keep us in that mindset and using the skills that we have, like the self-compassion and self-acceptance, like that's an active choice every day. And sometimes you need a reminder of like your past struggle to like keep you doing that and sort of like celebrate how far you come. We have been talking so long, and I promised you that I wouldn't take up much of your birthday, but I've really enjoyed this conversation. Is there anything else that we've not touched on that you want to talk about and make sure that people hear?
Yeah, maybe we can talk a little about my blog, The Effeminate, which is basically now just the Instagram account. So Effeminate is a pseudonym, is my pseudonym, and it basically is a Latin word that associates with anything that is feminine or effeminacy, or the idea of being effeminate. And that was something that was always used to bring me down. So I knew that I wanted to reclaim that word for myself and own it and wear it as a badge of pride, as something that helps me create opportunities. And I will always and forever be grateful that I've been able to successfully monetize my queerness and my trauma. So I still wear the feminine as my badge of honor, and I create these amazing, gorgeous, out of the world art pieces where I basically take naked pictures of me, and then I put just avant-garde, outrageous garments on top of me. And if this interests anyone, people are free to follow me on Instagram at Anwesh Sahoo. I continue to create these really weird looking but beautiful and gorgeous.
No, I was going to say, they're not weird, they're beautiful. Like I love following your art. It's amazing. And I'm so glad that that's been like therapeutic for you over the years, like to create like that. Art can be such a powerful way to cope, and also then to celebrate as well. Like it's not always just about coping. It's often about celebrating as well. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Anwesh, and talking about your mental health and your journey. We really appreciate you sharing your story. We hope that it speaks to anyone listening, and we'll be bringing you more such stories and discussions in the future. This is the Spotlight Podcast, and I am your host, Liesl, and this has been brought to you by Mitsu, a guided self-therapy app for anyone who is feeling anxious or depressed.